It all started with something small, so small, in fact, that I almost missed it. We were having dinner at home, a quiet Friday evening like many others, when I noticed Emily's bare neck. Her favorite gold necklace, the one she never took off, was gone. "Where's your necklace?" I asked, gesturing toward the empty space above her collarbone. Emily glanced down as if she hadn't noticed herself. "Oh, that," she said lightly, spearing a piece of broccoli with her fork. "It broke last week. I took it in for repair." Her explanation seemed casual, almost rehearsed, but I couldn't shake the oddity of it. That necklace had been in perfect condition, or so I thought. Still, I let it go, not wanting to sour the mood with unnecessary suspicion. She didn't seem upset, after all. Why should I be? But later that night, lying in bed, I couldn't help but replay the moment in my mind. Something about her tone hadn't felt right. I told myself I was overthinking. She'd always been busy, always juggling a demanding job, friends, and her hobbies. Yet, as I looked over at her sleeping face, peaceful and untroubled, the thought lingered. Over the past few months, Emily had been different. She worked late more often, came home after I was already in bed, and had even revamped her wardrobe, trading in her usual cozy sweaters for sharp, sophisticated dresses. I chalked it up to a refresh, a phase, maybe, but now, I wasn't so sure. That missing necklace felt like a tiny crack in the foundation of something I hadn't realized might be crumbling. The necklace faded from my mind for a while, pushed aside by the routine chaos of life. But the unease it planted lingered, quietly growing roots. A few weeks later, Emily mentioned a new coworker during dinner. "We've got this guy, Sam, in the office now. He's been leading some of the bigger accounts," she said, barely looking up from her plate. "That's good," I replied. "Less pressure on you, right?" "Yeah, definitely." Her response was clipped, and she quickly changed the subject. It wasn't unusual for her to mention work colleagues, but she usually had anecdotes or vented about the office politics. This time, though, it felt deliberately vague. A few days later, she dropped another detail casually. "I've got a work dinner next week. A few people from the team are going." I nodded but asked, "Where's it at?" "I could drive you if you want." Emily's fork froze midair. "Oh, that's sweet, but it's okay. It's at Le Grande Bistro. I'll probably stay late anyway, so it's easier if I just go myself." Her tone was light, dismissive even, but I couldn't ignore the tightening in my chest. Le Grande Bistro was upscale, fancier than the places her team typically went for after-work gatherings. I didn't press her, though, letting her explanation slide. The night of her dinner, I found myself pacing around the house, unable to focus on the book I was reading or the show I had streaming in the background. Something didn't sit right with me. I told myself it was nothing but curiosity, or maybe something deeper, got the better of me. I grabbed my keys and headed out, telling myself I just needed some air. But I wasn't aimlessly driving. I was heading to Le Grande Bistro. When I got there, I parked a little distance away, not wanting to be seen. I scanned the restaurant's warmly lit windows, searching for Emily. For a moment, I thought I was being ridiculous. Then I saw her. She was sitting at a table near the back, laughing, her head tilted slightly in that way she always did when she was deeply enjoying herself. Across from her was a man, tall, dark-haired, with a sharp suit and an easy smile. He leaned in, resting a hand lightly on her shoulder as she laughed. My stomach turned. They weren't just colleagues having dinner. Their body language was too familiar, too close. A warmth filled the space between them that no amount of professional camaraderie could explain away. I sat in the car for what felt like an eternity, watching their movements, their smiles, their laughter. It wasn't anger that boiled up inside me. It was a quiet, gnawing hurt. I thought about barging in, making a scene, but something held me back. Instead, I drove home, my mind spinning. By the time Emily came in a couple of hours later, her smile still lingering, I was sitting on the couch with the TV on, pretending to be engrossed. "How was dinner?" I asked, my tone as even as I could manage. "Good," she said quickly, pulling off her shoes. "Tiring, though. I'm going to head to bed." I watched her retreat to our bedroom. Her demeanor so calm, so practiced. The image of her and the man at the restaurant burned in my mind. I knew something was wrong now, deeply, unmistakably wrong. But I also knew one thing for sure. I wouldn't confront her until I had the full truth. The next morning, as sunlight filtered through the blinds, Emily hummed to herself in the shower. I stayed in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying the scene from the restaurant. I had questions, doubts, and a gnawing need to know the truth. Emily had always been trusting, maybe too trusting. She often left her laptop open, her phone unlocked. A thought struck me. If I wanted answers, they were probably right at my fingertips. When I heard the shower running, I slipped out of bed and walked to her desk. Her laptop was there, the screen dark but still on. I lifted the lid, and it sprang to life. Her email was open, but it was her messaging app that caught my attention. At the top of the chat list was a name I didn't recognize, Sam. My stomach tightened. I hesitated, fingers hovering over the trackpad before clicking. The conversation opened, and the blood drained from my face. The messages weren't just casual. They were intimate, flirty. They spoke of meetups and special evenings, and one message from just a week ago read, "I can't stop thinking about the last time we were together. When can we steal another moment?" Then there were the photos. I clicked on one, my heart pounding. It was Emily, smiling wide, dressed in a red cocktail dress I'd never seen before. She was standing next to Sam, his arm around her waist, both of them looking like a perfect couple. The backdrop was a rooftop terrace, sparkling city lights stretching into the distance. I felt a strange mixture of disbelief and fury. This wasn't speculation anymore. This wasn't suspicion. It was evidence. I heard the shower turn off and quickly shut the laptop, moving back to the bed just in time. Emily walked out, wrapped in a towel, her hair damp and messy. "Good morning," she said with a warm smile, as though nothing was amiss. I forced a smile back, though my mind was a storm. The rest of the day passed in a haze. At work, I sat at my desk, staring blankly at my computer screen, unable to focus. I couldn't decide what hurt more, the betrayal itself or the effort she'd put into hiding it. The woman I had shared my life with, my dreams, my everything, had built a secret life I hadn't been invited into. That night, as Emily lay next to me in bed, breathing softly in her sleep, I stared at the ceiling once again. My heart ached, but my resolve hardened. I wasn't going to let this go. If she had chosen to live in lies, I needed to uncover every single one. A few days later, Emily announced another work dinner. This time I was ready. I had spent the last few days battling between confronting her outright and digging deeper. Ultimately, I decided to follow her to see firsthand what she was hiding. That evening, I told her I had a late meeting and wouldn't be home until later. She barely reacted, simply nodding as she slipped on a sleek black dress I hadn't seen before. She looked stunning, and it struck me how much effort she was putting into this supposed work gathering. "Have fun," I said, masking my emotions as she grabbed her purse and walked out the door. As soon as she left, I grabbed my keys and followed her car at a careful distance. She drove across town to a small, cozy cafe I hadn't heard of before. I parked a few spots away, far enough not to be seen, and waited. It wasn't long before a familiar figure arrived. Sam. He walked into the cafe like he belonged there, and moments later, Emily greeted him at the door. They didn't hug, but their smile said everything. They sat at a corner table, partially hidden by a potted plant, leaning in close as they talked and laughed. I stayed in the car, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. For a moment, I considered storming in, flipping their table, and demanding answers. But something stopped me. I wanted to catch them off guard, not give Emily a chance to twist the truth or manipulate the narrative. Instead, I pulled out my phone and took a few photos through the cafe window. The two of them, their heads bent together, laughing. Sam's hand resting lightly on hers. I stayed long enough to watch them leave together, walking side by side to the parking lot. They didn't kiss or embrace, but their connection was undeniable. I snapped a few more photos, my heart pounding, before they drove off in separate cars. When I got home, Emily was already there, lounging on the couch in her pajamas. She looked up as I entered, a serene smile on her face. "How was your meeting?" she asked, her voice light. "It was fine," I replied, forcing a neutral tone. Inside, I was a storm of emotions. I wanted to demand answers, to ask how she could sit there so calmly, pretending like nothing was wrong. But I held back. This wasn't the moment. I needed more proof, more leverage before I made my move. That night, as I lay in bed beside her, I made a silent vow. The next time she tried to deceive me, I would be ready. In the days that followed, I became methodical. Emily's lies had carved a deep wound, but instead of confronting her outright, I channeled my anger into gathering everything I needed to confirm the full scope of her betrayal. Emily left for work each morning as though nothing had changed. She smiled, kissed me goodbye, and told me to have a good day. But I wasn't fooled anymore. I'd seen the cracks, and now I was determined to see the whole picture. That evening, after Emily went to bed, I carefully retrieved her laptop. Her password had always been simple, our anniversary date. My fingers trembled as I typed it in, but it worked. I opened her messaging app again, scrolling further back in her chat history with Sam. The messages told me everything. They'd been meeting for months. Their conversations ranged from mundane details about work to deeply personal exchanges. Sam often called her beautiful, and Emily responded with emojis and playful banter. But then, there were the more incriminating texts. I can't wait for our weekend away. Just you and me. I wish I could see you every night. He doesn't even notice when I'm gone. When we were together last night, I felt alive again. My breath hitched as I read them, the words slicing into me like knives. I couldn't ignore it anymore. This wasn't just flirtation. It was a full-blown affair. Then, I found the emails. They weren't as frequent as the messages, but they were equally damning. Hotel confirmations, dinner reservations, photos of the two of them together, smiling in places I didn't recognize. One photo in particular stood out. Emily in a swimsuit, standing on a beach, her hand intertwined with Sam's. I didn't recognize the place. A weekend trip she'd said was for a work retreat, apparently. I saved everything. Screenshots of the messages, photos of them together, copies of the emails. I transferred the files to a hidden folder on my laptop and backed them up to a USB drive. The next step was Sam. I needed to know more about him, not just as the man in Emily's messages, but as a person. Late one night, I searched his name on social media. His profiles were public, which made things easier. He was a marketing executive, handsome, charismatic, the type who posted photos of himself jogging at sunrise or attending fancy work events. But what caught my attention most was that Sam was married. His wife, Claire, appeared in many of his posts. She looked kind, the sort of woman who radiated warmth. She had no idea what her husband was up to. I could see it in the way she smiled in the photos with him, as if the world was perfectly fine. It wasn't fine. None of it was. I debated for a long time whether to reach out to Claire. I knew that revealing the truth to her would shatter her life as much as mine was being shattered. But in the end, I couldn't let Sam walk away unscathed. If he had chosen to intrude on my marriage, he needed to face the consequences. I created an anonymous account and composed a message to Claire. I included the screenshots, photos, and emails as evidence, sparing no detail. My hands trembled as I hit send, but when the message disappeared into the ether, a small weight lifted off my chest. Now, it wasn't just my fight anymore. The days following my message to Claire felt like walking on a razor's edge. Emily carried on as if nothing had changed, oblivious to the storm brewing just beneath the surface. But for me, every smile she gave, every casual remark, felt like a dagger. I had to bite my tongue to keep from letting it all spill out. Then, the response came. Claire messaged me back late one evening. Her reply was short but packed with emotion. "Thank you for telling me. I had no idea. This explains so much. Can we talk?" We arranged a call. That night, as Emily busied herself with a Netflix series in the living room, I slipped into the garage, phone in hand, and dialed Claire. Her voice was shaky when she answered. "Alex, right?" she said, trying to sound composed but failing. "Yes," I replied. I'm sorry you had to hear it this way." She let out a humorless laugh. "No, I'm glad you told me. I've had this gut feeling for a while, but every time I brought it up, Sam would brush me off, make me feel like I was imagining things." We compared notes. She told me about unexplained absences, mysterious business trips, and late nights at the office. It all aligned perfectly with the timeline I'd uncovered in Emily's messages. Claire's heartbreak mirrored my own, and as we spoke, I realized we were two sides of the same coin, strangers connected by betrayal. The next day, I felt a small shift in the air. Emily seemed distracted, her usual composure fraying at the edges. She fumbled with her phone more than usual, her brow furrowed as she read something on the screen. "What's wrong?" I asked casually, watching her closely. "Nothing," she said too quickly, slipping her phone into her pocket. "Just some work drama." I didn't press her, but I knew the wheels were already turning. Claire must have confronted Sam, and whatever fallout was happening in their household was starting to ripple into mine. The thought gave me grim satisfaction, but I wasn't done yet. Over the next few days, I began preparing a letter. It wasn't for Emily, it was for the people closest to us, our friends and family. I poured everything into it, detailing the affair and including the evidence I collected. It was harsh but honest. I wasn't going to let Emily spin the story to make herself the victim. If she wanted to lie to me, fine, but she wasn't going to lie to the people who mattered most. It was a preemptive strike, one I hoped I wouldn't have to use. But if things escalated, I wanted the truth to be undeniable. Then came the breaking point. One evening, Emily received a call while we were sitting on the couch. Her face paled when she saw the name on the screen, and she quickly excused herself, stepping outside to take the call. I followed her, staying just out of sight by the patio door. "I told you not to call me here," she hissed, her voice low but sharp. I couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but her agitation was unmistakable. "No, we can't meet right now. Things are already tense. I'll figure it out, okay? Stop panicking." She hung up, pacing the patio with her hands in her hair. I stepped back inside before she could see me, my heart pounding. It was time. I had all the proof I needed, and now I had the added satisfaction of knowing her perfect little illusion was beginning to crack. The following evening, I decided it was time to confront Emily. I couldn't stomach another night of pretending everything was normal while I knew the truth. The tension had built to the point where every glance, every word between us, felt loaded with unspoken accusations. I prepared everything, the messages, the photos, the emails. I printed the most damning evidence and placed it in a neat stack on the kitchen table. As I sat there waiting for Emily to come home, the anger and hurt that had been simmering inside me reached a boiling point, yet I forced myself to stay calm. I needed to approach this with clarity, not rage. When Emily walked through the door, she looked surprised to see me waiting for her in the kitchen instead of on the couch with the TV on like usual. "Hey," she said, hesitating. "What's going on?" "Sit down," I said, keeping my voice steady. My tone must have alarmed her, because she froze for a moment before cautiously taking a seat across from me. "What is this?" she asked, her eyes flickering to the stack of papers on the table. I pushed the pile toward her. "This," I said, "is the truth. The truth about you, me, and Sam." Her face went pale. For a moment, she didn't say anything, just stared at the papers as though they might burn her if she touched them. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said finally, her voice shaky but defiant. I leaned back, crossing my arms. "Don't insult my intelligence, Emily. I've seen the messages. I've seen the photos. I know about the meetups, the dinners, the weekend trips. So let's not play games." Her mask cracked then. She didn't even look at the evidence. Instead, her hands flew to her face, and she let out a shaky breath. "Alex, it's not what you think." "Really?" I interrupted, my voice rising. "Because what I think is that you've been sneaking around with another man for months. I think you've been lying to me every step of the way. So please tell me, what is it if not that?" She dropped her hands, her eyes glistening with tears. I didn't mean for it to happen. I swear, Alex. It just happened." "That's not an answer," I said coldly. "Why? Why do this to us?" Her lip trembled. "I don't know," she whispered. "I guess I felt invisible, like you stopped noticing me, like we were just going through the motions, and I needed someone to make me feel alive again." I stared at her, the weight of her words settling like a stone in my chest. "So, instead of talking to me, instead of telling me how you felt, you chose this?" You chose lies and betrayal. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I didn't mean to hurt you. I love you, Alex. I really do. I laughed bitterly. Love? Is that what you call this? Because to me, love looks a hell of a lot different. She reached out as if to touch my hand, but I pulled back. Please, Alex, she begged. We can fix this. I can fix this. Just give me a chance. I stood, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. You had a chance, Emily. You had a million chances to come clean, to be honest. But you didn't. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine. That night, I packed a bag and left. Emily begged me to stay, but I couldn't. The betrayal was too fresh, the wounds too raw. I didn't know exactly what the future would hold, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to live in a house built on lies. Leaving the house that night felt like tearing away a piece of myself. The quiet of the road, the dim hum of streetlights, they did little to calm the storm raging in my chest. I checked into a hotel, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared blankly at the wall. My mind spun with everything Emily had said, everything I'd discovered. The woman I thought I knew, the life I thought we'd built together, now seemed like a cruel illusion. The next morning, my phone buzzed relentlessly with messages from Emily. She pleaded for me to come home, to talk, to let her explain. I didn't respond. Instead, I contacted a lawyer. As much as it hurt, I knew I couldn't let this go on. Trust, once shattered, couldn't simply be glued back together. In the weeks that followed, the fallout from Emily's affair rippled outward. I moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. It wasn't much, just a single bedroom with mismatched furniture. But it was mine, free from the weight of betrayal. Emily, meanwhile, began reaching out to our mutual friends, trying to spin the story in her favor. But I'd been prepared for this. I shared the evidence, the messages, the photos with a few close friends, people I trusted to understand the truth. The response was swift and unanimous. Sympathy for me, condemnation for her. One by one, her social circle began to pull away. The woman who had once been the life of every gathering was now met with whispers and cold shoulders. Her reputation, carefully cultivated over the years, crumbled under the weight of her lies. It wasn't just her social life that suffered. Claire, Sam's wife, had taken swift action after I reached out to her. From what I'd heard, their confrontation had been explosive. She'd thrown him out of the house and filed for divorce almost immediately. Word of Sam's infidelity spread through their professional circles, too, and he eventually left the company where he and Emily worked. Emily was left to navigate the awkwardness alone, her professional image tarnished by association. She tried to reach out to me through mutual friends, asking for a chance to meet and talk. But I wasn't interested. There was nothing she could say to undo the damage. No apology that could erase the betrayal. My focus was on rebuilding my life, not salvaging the ruins of what we'd shared. For me, rebuilding meant rediscovering myself. I took up painting, a hobby I'd abandoned years ago, and found unexpected solace in it. I bought a motorcycle, a long-forgotten dream that Emily had once dismissed as impractical, and spent weekends riding through open stretches of highway, the wind in my face and the world at my feet. Slowly but surely, the anger and hurt began to fade. I started to see Emily's betrayal not as an end, but as a turning point, a painful push toward a life that was, in many ways, better than the one I'd left behind. Months passed, and the pain of Emily's betrayal dulled to a distant ache. My life was different now, simpler, quieter, but also freer. I focused on myself in ways I hadn't in years. I spent evenings painting, mornings riding my motorcycle to nowhere in particular, and weekends reconnecting with friends I'd neglected during my marriage. It was during one of those painting classes that I met Rachel. She was new to the studio, introduced by the instructor as someone who brought energy to every canvas. She had a warm smile and a genuine, easy laugh that filled the room. At first, our conversations were brief, just friendly exchanges over brushes and paints. But over time, they deepened. Rachel wasn't like Emily. She didn't demand attention or weave complex narratives about herself. She was kind and straightforward, with a refreshing honesty that made me feel safe in a way I hadn't felt in years. As we spent more time together, I found myself opening up about what had happened with Emily. I expected Rachel to pull back, maybe to pity me or judge me. But she didn't. Instead, she listened, offering quiet understanding and a perspective that helped me see things more clearly. "It's not about what she did to you," Rachel said one evening as we cleaned our brushes. "It's about how you choose to move forward. Don't let her actions define your story." Rachel was right. Emily's betrayal wasn't the end of my story. It was a turning point. Over time, I stopped thinking about what I'd lost and started appreciating what I'd gained. A clearer sense of myself, a deeper understanding of what I wanted in a partner, and a renewed determination never to settle for less than I deserved. One day, out of the blue, Emily sent me a letter. It was long, filled with apologies and reflections. She admitted her faults, acknowledged the pain she'd caused, and even said she hoped I could forgive her one day. I didn't respond, not out of anger, but because I no longer felt the need to. Emily was a part of my past now, a chapter one had closed. Rachel and I continued to grow closer, our bond deepening with every shared laugh, every quiet moment spent painting side by side. She taught me to trust again, to believe in love not as a fragile, fleeting thing, but as something that could be strong and enduring when built on honesty and respect. Looking back, I realized that Emily's betrayal, as painful as it was, had set me on a path I might never have found otherwise. It taught me to value myself, to stand up for my worth, and to embrace the unexpected turns life can take. The darkest times, I learned, often lead to the brightest beginnings. And as I stood there one evening, watching the sun set over a canvas I'd painted, Rachel's laughter echoing in the background, I knew one thing for certain. My life was mine again, and it was beautiful.